Dallas Cowboys fans woke up expecting a relatively quiet moment in the offseason. Maybe a rumor here or there, maybe a small roster tweak. Instead, the front office has suddenly shaken things up in a way that left a lot of people scratching their heads. Two defensive line moves happened almost back-to-back, and the immediate reaction across Cowboys Nation has been confusion mixed with concern. Because when you look at the defensive roster just a few days ago, the defensive tackle position actually looked like one of the deeper spots on the team. Now, in what feels like the blink of an eye, that depth has disappeared, and the Cowboys have created a situation where they now urgently need reinforcements along the defensive front. The biggest headline revolves around the decision to move ODAFE. The talented defensive tackle is heading to the San Francisco 49ers in exchange for a third-round pick. At first glance, a third-round selection sounds like reasonable value, especially when teams are always looking to build through the draft. But when you zoom out and look at the Cowboys' current defensive structure, the timing of the move raises a lot of questions. ODAFE was one of the few proven defensive linemen on this roster, a player capable of handling meaningful snaps and providing consistent disruption in the middle. Trading a player like that without already having a clear replacement in place is the kind of decision that naturally makes fans wonder what the larger plan really is. Almost immediately after that move, another one followed, and that only added to the confusion. Solomon Thomas was also dealt, with the Cowboys essentially moving up a handful of spots in the 7th round of the draft. The move also frees up a small amount of salary cap space, but again, the bigger picture is what people are focusing on. Thomas might not have been the centerpiece of the defensive line, but he was still part of the rotation and someone capable of giving the unit valuable snaps during the course of a long season. When you combine that departure with the ODAFE trade, the Cowboys suddenly went from having multiple defensive tackles available to a situation where the position now looks alarmingly thin. That is where the frustration begins to build for many observers. When a team trades away talent at a position of strength, it usually signals that something bigger is coming. Maybe a major signing in free agency. Maybe a trade that brings in an impact player. Maybe a long-term strategy that becomes clear once the dust settles. But right now, that clarity simply does not exist. Instead, what fans see is a defensive front that now has a noticeable gap right in the middle, and the team has not yet made a move that explains why those two players were allowed to leave. From a purely financial standpoint, the trades do not dramatically transform the Cowboys' salary cap situation either. Moving ODAFE provides some cap flexibility, but it is not the kind of massive savings that suddenly opens the door for a blockbuster signing. The same goes for the Solomon Thomas move, which saves a smaller amount of money but still does not drastically reshape the team's financial landscape. When you add those numbers together, the total space created is helpful, but it does not immediately point toward a clear major acquisition that would justify weakening the defensive line in the process. That is why many fans are trying to read between the lines and figure out what the front office might be preparing for next. Could this signal a bigger trade somewhere else on the roster? Could the Cowboys be positioning themselves for a defensive overhaul that has not fully revealed itself yet? Or is the organization simply placing a massive amount of faith in the upcoming draft to refill those gaps? Each possibility carries its own level of risk, especially considering how important the defensive front has been to the identity of this team in recent seasons. Another element that cannot be ignored is how valuable ODAFE could become in his new environment. The San Francisco 49ers have built a reputation for maximizing the potential of defensive linemen, particularly players who bring versatility and quickness to the interior. That system has consistently turned talented defensive tackles into highly productive contributors. Because of that, it would not be surprising at all to see ODAFE thrive in San Francisco, which only adds another layer of pressure on the Cowboys' decision-makers. If he performs at a high level there, while Dallas struggles to rebuild its defensive interior, this trade will be examined even more closely as the season unfolds. Meanwhile, the Cowboys' current defensive tackle group suddenly looks much thinner than it did before these moves were made. There are still some experienced names available on the roster, but the depth that once gave this position stability is no longer there. That means the front office now has to find answers somewhere, whether that comes through the draft, through late additions and free agency, or through another unexpected trade that no one saw coming. The timing of these decisions also makes the situation more complicated. Free agency is already underway, and many of the most attractive defensive linemen have already found new homes. That limits the number of proven options available on the open market, which means the Cowboys may have to compete for veterans who are either older, less consistent, or simply not the same caliber of player that ODAFE represented. That reality is part of what makes these moves feel so puzzling to many people who follow the team closely. Of course, the NFL offseason often unfolds in unpredictable ways. Teams sometimes make a move that looks confusing in isolation, only for the bigger strategy to reveal itself days later. The Cowboys front office could very well have another piece of the puzzle ready to fall into place. Maybe there's a player they are targeting aggressively. Maybe they believe the upcoming draft class offers the perfect opportunity to inject young talent into the defensive line. But until that next step becomes visible, the reaction from fans and analysts is likely to remain the same. A mix of curiosity, skepticism, and a growing desire to understand what direction this team is truly heading. When you start breaking down the current roster after these trades, the reality becomes even clearer. The Cowboys suddenly find themselves in a position where the defensive tackle group is no longer a strength, but instead one of the biggest question marks on the entire team. Not long ago, the defensive front looked like it had enough bodies to rotate effectively and survive the grind of a long season. Now, the rotation looks extremely thin, and that immediately puts pressure on the remaining players to carry a much heavier workload than originally expected. At the moment, the interior of the defensive line is built around a small group of names who will have to step into much bigger roles. That can work if those players elevate their performance and stay healthy. But that is a massive gamble in a league where injuries along the defensive front are almost inevitable. The Cowboys are now asking this group to hold the middle of the defense together while the rest of the front seven adjusts to the new structure. That is a lot of responsibility for a unit that just lost two contributors in such a short span of time. The ripple effect of those decisions could extend beyond the defensive tackle position as well. When the interior of the defensive line becomes weaker or less stable, it can impact everything around it. Linebackers suddenly have to deal with more blockers reaching the second level. Edge rushers may find it harder to collapse the pocket if quarterbacks can comfortably step up in a clean space. Defensive coordinators often rely on interior pressure to disrupt timing in the passing game. And when that pressure disappears, opposing offenses gain more control over the tempo of the game. Because of that, many observers believe the Cowboys may now be forced to address this position earlier in the draft than they originally planned. The team still holds valuable draft capital, including a first-round pick that could now become extremely important. If the front office believes there is a defensive tackle prospect capable of becoming an immediate contributor, it would not be surprising to see them invest that selection in rebuilding the interior defensive line. What once might have been considered a luxury pick has now become a potential necessity. However, relying on rookies to immediately stabilize a defensive front can be risky. Even highly talented prospects often need time to adjust to the speed and physical demands of the professional level. That means the Cowboys might be entering the season with a defensive line that is still developing chemistry, while also trying to remain competitive in a division that features several strong offensive teams. That combination creates a delicate balancing act for the coaching staff. Another challenge is the current landscape of free agency. At this stage of the offseason, many of the most reliable defensive tackles have already been signed by teams looking to reinforce their rosters early. The remaining pool of available players is significantly thinner, and many of the options are veterans who are either nearing the later stages of their careers or coming off inconsistent seasons. That does not mean those players cannot contribute, but it does mean the Cowboys will have to be very selective if they decide to pursue help on the open market. This situation has also sparked debate about whether the organization is quietly planning a broader defensive transformation. Sometimes teams make moves that appear puzzling at first because they're clearing the way for a completely different system or philosophy. If the Cowboys are preparing to reshape the structure of their defense, that could explain why certain players were moved even if they were productive. Coaches often prioritize scheme fit just as much as individual talent, and that can lead to surprising roster decisions during the offseason. Still, fans naturally want to see the vision behind those moves. Supporters of the team understand that roster construction requires tough choices, but they also expect those choices to lead somewhere. Right now, the direction remains uncertain, and that uncertainty is what has generated such strong reactions across Cowboys Nation. When a team removes two players from a position group without clearly replacing them, people are going to ask questions about the strategy. There is also the reality that the Cowboys are trying to remain competitive while navigating financial limitations and long-term planning. The front office may believe that reallocating resources now will give the team more flexibility in the future. Sometimes that means sacrificing short-term stability in order to create opportunities later down the road. Whether that gamble pays off will depend heavily on what happens next, especially in the draft and the remainder of free agency. One thing is certain, the spotlight is now firmly on the Cowboys' next move. Every decision from this point forward will be examined through the lens of these trades. If the team quickly brings in new talent and reinforces the defensive front, these moves could eventually be seen as part of a larger restructuring plan. But if the Cowboys struggle to fill the gaps that were created, the questions surrounding these trades will only grow louder as the offseason continues. For now, the defensive line remains one of the biggest storylines surrounding the team. Fans are watching closely, waiting to see how the front office responds to the challenge it has created. The Cowboys have made their move, and the league is now waiting to see what comes next as the organization attempts to reshape its defense and redefine its strategy moving forward. But before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Your support helps us keep bringing you the latest updates on the Dallas Cowboys. Feel free to share your thoughts on the news in the comments as well. A quiet but intriguing rumor has begun circulating around league circles, suggesting that pass rusher OWEH could somehow emerge as a surprising target for the Dallas Cowboys. Nothing official has surfaced, and no negotiations have been confirmed, yet the mere possibility is already enough to spark debate among analysts and fans who closely follow the balance of power across the National Football League. OWEH, currently a key defensive piece for the Baltimore Ravens, has built a reputation as one of the league's most explosive edge defenders. His combination of speed, off the snap, and relentless pursuit has made him a disruptive presence against opposing quarterbacks. Because of that, the idea of him wearing the star on his helmet has instantly captured attention, even if the scenario remains firmly in the realm of speculation. League insiders have quietly hinted that Dallas has been exploring ways to add more depth and versatility to its pass rush rotation. While the Cowboys already boast a formidable defensive front, some observers believe the organization could still be searching for another dynamic edge threat capable of shifting momentum during crucial stretches of the season. In that context, OWEH's name appearing in whispers and rumor columns is hardly surprising. From Baltimore's perspective, moving a young and productive defender would seem unlikely. The Ravens have long prioritized a physical, aggressive defense, and OWEH fits perfectly within that identity. Still, speculation in the NFL often grows from small sparks. Contract projections, roster reshuffling, or the possibility of a bold trade proposal. Any of those elements could be enough to fuel the conversation. For Dallas, the potential impact would be enormous. Pairing OWEH with the Cowboys' current defensive playmakers could create one of the most feared pass-rushing units in the conference. Rival teams would suddenly have to account for relentless pressure from multiple directions, something that could reshape the defensive narrative across the NFC landscape. For now, the rumor remains just that, a rumor. But in the NFL, even whispers can sometimes evolve into the story everyone suddenly saw coming. And if OWEH's name continues to surface in connection with Dallas, the speculation may only grow louder. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to keep receiving exclusive news about the Dallas Cowboys, please subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. We always look forward to your comments and opinions. See you in the next video.